From the 3rd chapter of the book of Lamentations, we read, "The thought of my affliction and my homelessness is wormwood and gall. My soul continually thinks of it and is bowed down within me. But this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. The steadfast love of the holy never ceases. God's mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. The beloved is my portion, says my soul. Therefore, I will hope in God. The Holy One is good to those who wait, to the soul that seeks God. It is good that one should wait quietly for the salvation of the beloved." And a poem by Irish poet David White called "The Journey." Above the mountains, the geese turn into the light again, painting their black silhouettes on the sky. Sometimes everything has to be inscribed across the heavens so you can find that one line already written inside you. Sometimes everything has to be inscribed across the heavens so you can find the one line already written inside you. Sometimes it takes a great sky to find that first bright and indescribable wedge of freedom in your heart. Sometimes, with the bones of the black sticks left when the fire has gone out, someone has written something new in the ashes of your life. Sometimes, with the bones of the black sticks left when the fire has gone out, someone has written something new in the ashes of your life. You are not leaving. Even as the light fades quickly now, you are arriving. This is ancient wisdom and holy word.
Thanks be to all that is wise and holy.
All creation is wisdom and holy word.
All creation sings wisdom now. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. So when I was 14, my father, a Presbyterian minister, was granted his one and only sabbatical of his 40-year career. I had only lived in rural Missouri at that point in my life, and I had traveled to 2 places, Colorado a couple of times with my family to camp, and North Carolina, where we would visit my father's parents here in Asheville and then go across the state to the eastern part of the state where my mother's family lived. But with the sabbatical, we got a whole summer to travel to exotic places like Boston, and then Rome and Amsterdam and London. But most of the time we spent in Scotland. When we arrived by train to Scotland, I remember getting out and putting my feet on the ground and having a feeling wash over me. It was a kind of shimmering feeling. And if the feeling had words, they were something like, "Welcome home." Now, as a very average, very waspy, middle American young teen, I had no language for that experience. I didn't have a container to put it in or a frame of reference to help me understand it, so it just sort of stayed in the back of my mind until years later, when I began to grasp the reality of ancestral connections and the power of spiritual roots. 2 weeks ago, I had the pleasure of spending 3 days with John Philip Newell, a Celtic scholar and author of many books, including his latest called Sacred Earth, Sacred Soul. The event was held at Montreat, a place where I spent summers of my youth attending conferences and learning to hike. Those were the first mountains I fell in love with. So between the subject matter and the sense of place, I once again had that shimmering feeling all through my body. Welcome home, Laura. For those of you who don't know, Celtic spirituality, like the creation spirituality that we celebrate here, is based in a love of the sacred earth and a recognition of the sacredness of all life. Original blessing is Matt Fox's term. The early Celtic Christians called it original grace. When Christianity first came to Ireland and Scotland, it was not the empirical form of religion that had captured Roman Christianity. So a bit of background for some of you who don't know, a little church history. So the concept of original sin came from Augustine in the 4th century. He based it on his interpretation of Paul's letters in the New Testament. Jesus never said anything about original sin. And really, neither did Paul, but that requires a little more unpacking that we're not going to take on today. Augustine was very cozy with the bishops of his time, who were in turn very cozy with the emperor. And so there was this weird thing happening. The Jesus movement, which up until this time had been very diverse and had been either ignored as some fringe sect or been actively persecuted, suddenly became the state religion. And for the state or empire, focusing on the idea that Augustine offered, which said people were dreadfully sinful and in desperate need of saving, was very convenient. It was disempowering. And so the state, through the church, could position itself as the only place to get the salvation needed. You see what's happening here? Yeah, okay. So this state-church enmeshment found all the alternative understandings of Jesus, those not based in sin and salvation, threatening. So the Gospels of Mary and Philip and Thomas, for example, were condemned as heretical and actively suppressed. And similarly, theologians who focused on the sacredness of all life, or the Christ within, or the wisdom of the earth, or the divine feminine aspects of God, all of those existed, by the way. That's not new stuff. That goes way back. All of these got pushed aside, and not just ignored, but violently repressed. Okay, so meanwhile, up in Ireland and Scotland, there were folks who had come into contact with Christianity before empire took it over. And because they were far enough away from Rome, they didn't get the memo. Now, the Roman Empire had made its way to the British Isles even before the time of Christ, during the period of Julius Caesar. And in fact, the Roman Empire conquered the portion of the British Isles now known as England, right around the same time that the New Testament books were being written. Rome had a harder time with Scotland and Ireland. You can read about Hadrian's Wall if you want more info on that. So the influence of the Roman Empire made its way toward Scotland and Ireland, but never fully took hold. And likewise, the Christianity that later got enmeshed with that empire was not exactly the kind of Christianity that was being practiced in the Isles until centuries later. So, many Celtic scholars notice what Newell calls the radical continuity between indigenous Celtic beliefs and Christ. Okay, so that is, when they heard about Jesus, they accepted his wisdom as being in line with their own worldview. Now, several centuries later, that did change, but here we're talking about the very early centuries, around 200 to 600 CE. So for the Celts, that meant continuity with the Druidic wisdom of their land. There isn't a great deal of scholarly agreement on who the Druids actually were or what they believed, but we can discern. They had shamanic-like priests and priestesses, male and female, and they valued the earth and her creatures as sacred, and they believed in the divine soul running through all of it. Also, they liked trees, especially oak trees. Okay, so that's a lot of history, both personal and global. So let's pause and ask the important question, so what? So what? So for me personally, the so what has to do with my own sense of being at home in Celtic lands and with their spirituality, and especially with the continuity of a spirituality that is centered in the soulfulness of earth, and thus embraced Christian wisdom tradition with that understanding. Early Celtic Christians saw the Christ figure as being in line with the Druids, and St. Columba, in fact, said, "Jesus is my Druid." That's a statement I could get behind. Whatever your own spiritual roots are, if you feel attuned with this community, I imagine that you find a sense of spiritual home in seeing the sacred life of trees and birds, of mountains and rivers, that you feel at home with believing that you are, at your core, a sacred creature. That whatever has not worked in your life, whatever mistakes you've made, even whatever harm you've done, that is not the deepest truth about you. The deepest truth is that you are made in the image of God. And even more, that you are an image of God. And that God's image and wisdom is reflected back to you through other souls, human souls, and souls alive in an enchanted world. In an enchanted world. Home. Now, in Christianity, there is also this long tradition of talking about home as somewhere other than this world. Gospel songs speak of this world not being our home, of being homesick, of going home one day by and by. There's a strong idea that heaven is out there waiting for us, and that any feeling we have of not being at home here is proof that we're meant to be somewhere else. Christian writer C.S. Lewis stated this belief clearly, saying, "If we find ourselves with a desire that nothing in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that we were made for another world." The most probable explanation is that we were made for another world. What confuses me about this is that the same people who say this are the ones who say, or who love to quote John 3:16, "For God so loved the world," this world. If God so loved this world, why would God make us for a different one and be so eager to get us out of this one and into that one? What if the most probable explanation is not that we were made for another world, but that we have fallen asleep to the enchantment of this one? We do, as Lewis says, find ourselves with desires that we intuit can't be satisfied in all the ways we try so hard to satisfy them. We try not only to fill those desires with material things and money and food and sex, but also more noble pursuits like meaningful work and loving relationships. And still, we know that somehow the itch has not quite been scratched. So Lewis is not wrong to say that there are desires we experience that we intuit can't be filled in all the myriad ways we try to fill them, but maybe he's wrong about the most probable explanation for that intuition. What if filling those desires requires us not to leave this world, but to fall in love with it more deeply? Mathematician Blaise Pascal named those deep, seemingly unfillable holes in our soul as God-shaped vacuums. I think he was correct. There is built within us a space that only God can fill. But what if God fills that space not by whisking us away from this world, but by calling us to find the holy in it? What if we sometimes don't feel at home in this world because we've forgotten that God is all around us in it? Every leaf and every twig, every bird and every mammal, in the mycelia beneath our feet, and the clouds above the mountains. What if the rivers are alive and sing to us daily of the beauty that we need for salvation, but we've forgotten how to listen? We're in November, Native American Heritage Month, and I think over the last several decades that white Americans have become so fascinated with Native rituals and religions because we sense that Native peoples held on to something that most white folks lost. And then, of course, we do what white people are so good at: we steal it. We accumulate it like a prize that we deserve. Maybe this is why I long to return to my own indigenous past, a time before empire acquired and distorted the way of Jesus, a time before Jesus when my people looked for wood sprites and water spirits, concepts that got trivialized into little green leprechauns and other silliness. I imagine if we go far enough back into any of our lineages, we'll find something like this. And even if you can't directly trace your own past to a particular path, we can sense in our being, in our bodies, that the possibility of a world alive with the energy of spirit is the world we long for. A world that is full of loving, friendly reminders. A world that feels like home.
Though below me I feel no motion, standing on these mountains and plains, far away from the rolling ocean, still my dry land heart can say, I've been sailing all my life now, never harbor or port have I known, for wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue home.
Richard Rohr writes in his book, The Universal Christ, once we know that the entire physical world around us, all of creation, is both the hiding place and the revelation place for God, this world becomes home, safe, enchanted, offering grace to anyone who looks deeply. When we understand that God is hidden in plain sight all around us, the world becomes home, safe, enchanted, graced. And the world becomes more than home. It becomes our relative. It becomes our ancestor. Dr. Keola Fox, a Kanaka Maoli anthropologist and genomic researcher, tells us that the land itself and the conditions of that land, like altitude and climate, impact our genome. just as our human ancestors do. So when Dr. Fox says the land and the waters, the oceans and the rivers are part of us, relatives and ancestors in a very real way, that's a scientific statement about our genetic makeup. Safe, enchanted, our ancestor. Quite literally, our mother. If the land itself is our relative, then how do we live? This is about more than getting in touch with fairies frolicking in the moss. Though, if that's your jam, go for it. This is about the choices we make, the care we take or don't take of our earth family. So today is the first day of the 2022 United Nations Climate Change Conference, or COP27 for short. For 27 years, the nations of the world have been gathering to discuss how we collaborate on issues of climate change. Today they gather in Egypt. We can predict that the G20 nations, that is the top 20 world economies, will once again balk at the concept of paying their fair share of the climate cleanup. The G20 create 80% of the world's greenhouse emissions. Let me say that again. The top 20 world economies emit 80% of the world's greenhouse gases. And every year, the poorer countries, the developing world as we like to call it, say to the G20, "You have poisoned the well we all drink from. You must clean it up. We cannot afford to clean up your messes. And your messes impact us more than they impact you. So come on and clean up your mess." If we knew this world to be our home, this one, not another one yet to come, not someday, not by and by, but this one, now, how would we treat it? If we knew this land to be our relative, a part of our own genetic makeup, our family, how would we love her?
Sun, my sail, and moon, my rudder, as I ply the starry sea, leaning over the edge in wonder, casting questions into the deep, drifting here with my ship's companions, all we kindred pilgrim souls, making our way by the lights of the heavens in our beautiful blue world.
J. Philip Newell writes, "We know things in the core of our being that we have not necessarily been taught. And some of this deep knowing may actually be at odds with what our society or religion has tried to teach us. We are reawakening to what we know in the depths of our being, that the earth is sacred and that this sacredness is at the heart of every human being and every life form. To awaken again to this deep knowing is to be transformed in the ways we choose to live and relate and act. To awaken is to be transformed. To wake up is to be transformed. Some days I despair of us waking up in time. Many days I doubt we can transform quickly enough. And it's hard to know how people like those of us in this room compete with the Elon Musks of the world. And yet, what if this whole thing turns on just enough of us tuning in to the messages the earth is sending? Some of them don't require fine-tuning. Wildfires and floods and droughts and melting ice caps and ruptured pipelines. The earth is screaming at us, wake up! But some of the messages are more subtle. The ways we are learning how the mycelium communicate. How the trees send messages across the air. How healing herbs can sing to those who have learned to listen. How animals can teach us how to calm down our own nervous systems. I believe that Earth is trying to speak more urgently to more of us. I believe she is calling us to pray with her, not just for her. I believe that we live on an enchanted planet in a friendly universe. I believe that we are, in fact, home, right here, right now. What if the spirits of earth are speaking to us more often now because they are trying to tell us the secret of how to be saved? What if God is hidden in plain sight all around us, longing to save us right here, right now?
Sing along, everybody. I give thanks to